An unexpected encounter. In the cold depths of space, an immense alien fleet glided through the void, their sleek ships bristling with advanced weaponry. Commander Zorgak stood on the bridge of the flagship, his 4 eyes narrowed as he surveyed the holographic display of the sector ahead. "The humans control this region," Zorgak stated, his voice dripping with disdain. "They are a primitive species, barely worthy of our notice. We will brush aside their paltry defenses and claim their worlds for the glory of the Klixathian Empire." The officers around him chittered in agreement, their exoskeletons clicking with anticipation of an easy victory. The Klixathian fleet had conquered countless worlds, their technology and martial prowess unmatched by any foe they had faced. The humans, they believed, would be no different. As they crossed into human territory, long-range sensors picked up a small group of ships holding position near a vibrant blue planet. Zorgax leaned forward, mandibles twitching in amusement at the sight. "Look at them, so few in number," he scoffed. "They dare to stand against us. They must be truly foolish or desperate." The human ships maintained their formation, not budging an inch even as the vastly larger Klixathian fleet bore down on them. Zorgax had to admit, their steadfast defiance in the face of overwhelming odds was almost admirable. Almost. "Hail them," Zorgax commanded. "Let us hear their pleas for mercy before we destroy them." The communications officer opened a channel, and a human face appeared on the view screen. The male wore a crisp uniform, his features set in a determined expression. "This is Captain Ilara Vostok of the Terran Defense Fleet," the human declared, his voice steady. "You have entered our sovereign space. Turn back now or face the consequences." Zorgax threw his head back and laughed, a rasping sound that echoed through the bridge. Around him, the other Klixathians joined in, their mirth at the human's audacity filling the air. "Consequences," Zorgax said, once his laughter subsided. "You truly believe you stand a chance against the might of the Klixathian Empire? Your species is young and weak, your technology inferior. We will swat you aside like insects." Captain Vostok's expression remained impassive. "You underestimate us at your peril," he warned. "This is your final chance. Withdraw, or we will be forced to engage." Zorgax leaned back in his command chair, a cruel smile playing across his angular features. "By all means, engage," he said, a mocking edge to his tone. "Let us see what your pathetic ships can do against the pride of the Klixathian fleet." With a curt nod, Captain Vostok cut the transmission. Zorgax settled back, ready to savor the swift destruction of the impudent humans. "All ships, attack formation," he barked. "Target their lead vessels and fire at will. Show them the folly of defying the Klixathian Empire." The alien fleet surged forward, weapons charging with an ominous hum. Blazing bolts of energy lanced out toward the human ships, the Klixathians expecting to see the primitive vessels crumple and burst under the onslaught. To their shock, the human ships moved with surprising speed and coordination, deftly evading the initial volleys. Their hulls shimmered with the glow of advanced shield technology, absorbing the impacts that did land with minimal damage. Zorgax sat up straighter, his earlier amusement giving way to a flicker of unease. The humans were not simply sitting idle and waiting to be destroyed. They were fighting back, and with a skill that belied their supposedly primitive nature. The human ships split into smaller groups, weaving through the Klixathian formations with daring maneuvers. They targeted weak points in the alien vessel's defenses, their weapons striking with surgical precision. Explosions blossomed across the Klixathian fleet as human fire found its mark, causing mounting damage. On the bridge, alarms blared and officers shouted frantic reports of shield failures and hull breaches. Zorgax gripped the arms of his chair tightly, his earlier confidence rapidly draining away. "Impossible," he growled. "How can they be causing so much damage? Our technology is far superior." Yet even as he spoke, another Klixathian ship shuddered under a barrage of human weapons fire, its drives going critical before it erupted in a blinding flash. The human fleet pressed their advantage, displaying a level of coordination and tactical acumen that Zorgax had never encountered in a supposedly lesser species. As the battle raged on, it became increasingly clear that the Klexathians had severely underestimated their foe. The human ships fought with a tenacity and skill that belied their small numbers, their every action speaking to a deep resolve and a refusal to submit. Zorgax felt a sinking sensation in the pit of his stomach as he watched his fleet being systematically picked apart by the very beings he had dismissed as primitive. The realization began to dawn on him that the Klexathian Empire may have finally met a challenger capable of standing against their might. The humans, it seemed, were not so easily cowed. They fought on, their ships darting and weaving, striking again and again at the heart of the Klexathian fleet. And with each passing moment, the once proud alien armada found itself being driven back, their aura of invincibility crumbling under the relentless human assault. In that moment, as the battle reached a fevered pitch, Zorgax began to understand the depths of the miscalculation he and his kind had made. The humans were not just another primitive species to be crushed underfoot. They were something far more dangerous, a force to be reckoned with, a people with the courage and tenacity to stand against even the most fearsome of foes. And as the first part of this fateful encounter drew to a close, with the human fleet holding firm against the mighty Klexathian war machine, it became clear that the aliens had indeed picked the wrong species to challenge. The humans would not go quietly into the Part 2. Adaptability under fire. As the battle raged on, the human fleet continued to demonstrate a remarkable level of coordination and tactical prowess in the face of the relentless Klexathian onslaught. Despite the alien ship's superior numbers and advanced technology, the humans proved to be a formidable adversary, adapting to the changing battlefield conditions with astonishing speed and fluidity. On the bridge of the human flagship, Captain Ilara Vostok stood resolute, her eyes fixed on the holographic display of the ongoing engagement. Around her, the crew worked with focused intensity, their fingers flying across consoles as they coordinated the fleet's defense. "Lieutenant Kazuki, what's the status of our shield generators?" Vostok asked, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the bridge. "Shields holding steady at 80% capacity, Captain," Kazuki reported, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The Klexathians are hitting us hard, but our defenses are adapting to their weapons' frequencies." Vostok nodded, a flicker of pride crossing her features. The human fleet's adaptive shielding technology was proving to be a game-changer, allowing their ships to withstand the brunt of the alien assault far better than the Klexathians had anticipated. "Keep adjusting those frequencies," Vostok ordered, "and divert power from non-essential systems to bolster our shields. We need to buy ourselves as much time as possible." As the crew carried out her commands, Vostok turned her attention to the tactical display, studying the ebb and flow of the battle. The human ships were holding their own, but the sheer number of Klexathian vessels was beginning to take its toll. They needed to find a way to even the odds, and fast. "Commander Rovik, any weaknesses in the Klexathian formations?" Vostok asked, glancing over at the Tellarite tactical officer. Rovik grunted, his porcine features scrunched in concentration as he analyzed the data streaming across his console. "Their flanks are exposed," he reported after a moment. "They're focusing too much on a frontal assault, leaving gaps in their defensive perimeter." Vostok's eyes narrowed, a plan taking shape in her mind. "Then that's where we strike," she declared. "Commander Jal, coordinate with the Endeavor and the Valkyrie. Have them lead a flanking maneuver and hit those exposed areas with everything they've got." The Andorian communications officer nodded sharply, her antennae quivering with determination as she relayed the orders to the other ships. Within moments, the human fleet began to shift, smaller groups of vessels breaking away from the main formation and racing towards the Klexathian flanks. The alien ships, caught off guard by the sudden change in tactics, struggled to react in time. The human vessels struck with precision and fury, their weapons tearing through the weakened shields and hull plating of the Klexathian ships. Explosions rippled across the alien fleet as the humans pressed their advantage, causing mounting losses among the once confident invaders. On the bridge of the Klixathian flagship, Commander Zorgax watched in growing disbelief as his fleet was thrown into disarray. The primitive humans, whom he had dismissed as little more than insects to be crushed, were proving to be far more resourceful and dangerous than he had ever imagined. "Reinforce our flanks," Zorgax bellowed, his voice tinged with desperation. "Don't let the humans break through." But even as his officers scrambled to comply, the human ships continued their relentless assault, their attacks growing bolder and more precise with each passing moment. The Klexathians, for all their advanced technology and martial prowess, found themselves struggling to counter the humans' unconventional strategies and sheer determination. Back on the human flagship, Captain Vostok watched with grim satisfaction as the tide of battle began to turn in their favor. The Klexathians were on the back foot now, their once unassailable confidence crumbling in the face of human resilience and adaptability. "Pressing our attack, Captain," Lieutenant Kazuki reported, a note of triumph in his voice. "The Klexathian fleet is in disarray. Their formation is breaking." Vostok allowed herself a small smile, but she knew the battle was far from over. The Klexathians were a proud and powerful race, and they would not accept defeat easily. They would regroup and come at the humans with renewed ferocity, determined to crush this upstart species that dared to defy them. But for now, in this moment, the humans had shown their mettle. They had demonstrated to the galaxy that they were not a race to be underestimated or trifled with. They were adaptable, resourceful, and above all, determined to defend their homes and their way of life against any threat, no matter how daunting. As the battle continued to rage, with the human fleet striking again and again at the heart of the Klixathian armada, a sense of hope and defiance filled the hearts of every human crew member. They knew that they were fighting not just for themselves, but for the entire human race, for the right to exist and thrive in a galaxy that had once seemed so hostile and unyielding. And with each passing moment, as the Klexathians struggled to counter the humans' indomitable spirit and tactical brilliance, it became increasingly clear that the aliens had underestimated the depths of human courage and resolve. They had challenged the wrong species, and now they were paying the price for their arrogance. The battle was far from over, but the humans had already achieved a great victory. They had shown the galaxy that they would not go quietly into the night, that they would fight with every ounce of their being to protect their homes and their future. And in doing so, they had set the stage for a new era in galactic history, one in which the human race would take its rightful place among the stars, unbowed and unbroken. Turning the tide. As the battle between the human fleet and the Klixathian armada reached a fevered pitch, the tide of the engagement began to shift in a way that few could have predicted. The arrival of human reinforcements, coupled with the unwavering determination and tactical prowess of the defenders, had thrown the once confident alien invaders into disarray. The newly arrived human ships, sleek and bristling with advanced weaponry, wasted no time in joining the fray. They tore into the Klixathian flanks with a ferocity that caught the aliens off guard, their weapons striking with pinpoint accuracy and devastating effect. Among these reinforcements was the HMS Thunderchild, a heavy cruiser renowned for its cutting-edge technology and the skill of its crew. At the helm stood Captain Marcus Dunbar, a seasoned veteran known for his unorthodox tactics and unwavering courage in the face of adversity. "All right, people," Dunbar barked, his eyes gleaming with a fierce determination. "Let's show these Klixathian bastards what happens when they mess with the human race. Engage the enemy and give him hell." The crew of the Thunderchild responded with a resounding cheer, their spirits bolstered by their captain's indomitable presence. They surged into battle, their ship dancing through the chaos of the engagement with a grace and precision that belied its size. Alongside the Thunderchild, other human vessels brought their own unique strengths and capabilities to the fight. The Valkyrie, a nimble frigate, darted in and out of the Clixathian formations, using its speed and maneuverability to strike at the enemy's weak points and sow confusion among their ranks. The Endeavor, a science vessel retrofitted for combat, employed an array of experimental weapons and electronic warfare systems to disrupt the Clixathian communications and targeting arrays. Its crew, a mix of brilliant scientists and skilled warriors, worked in perfect harmony to turn the tide of battle in humanity's favor. As the human reinforcements pressed the attack, the Clixathians found themselves increasingly on the defensive. Their once invincible ships, so accustomed to crushing all who stood in their way, now shuddered under the relentless onslaught of human firepower and ingenuity. On the bridge of the Clixathian flagship, Commander Zorgax watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled by the very species he had dismissed as primitive and weak. The realization that he had grossly underestimated the humans' capabilities and resolve gnawed at his pride, a bitter taste in his mouth. "Commander," a panicked officer called out, his voice trembling with fear, "the humans are breaking through our lines. Our ships are being destroyed faster than we can counter them." Zorgax slammed his fist against the armrest of his command chair, his frustration and anger boiling over. "Impossible," he snarled. "We are the Clixathian Empire, the most powerful force in the galaxy. How can these upstart humans be defeating us?" As if in answer to his question, a human transmission cut through the chaos of the battle, the voice of Captain Ilara Vostok ringing out with a defiant clarity. "Attention, Clixathian fleet," she declared, her words laced with a steely determination. "This is your final warning. Withdraw from our space immediately, or face the full might of the human race. We will not bow to your aggression, and we will not surrender our homes and our freedom. Leave now, or be destroyed." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. For a moment, even the din of battle seemed to fade, as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath in anticipation of what would come next. On the human ships, a sense of renewed determination and pride surged through the crews. They had faced the Clixathian juggernaut head-on, and they had not only survived, but were now driving the invaders back. The once unstoppable alien armada was crumbling before their very eyes, its aura of invincibility shattered by the indomitable human spirit. The Clixathians, for their part, were thrown into disarray by the human broadcast. Some, their confidence utterly broken by the turn of events, began to flee the battlefield, their ships limping away in a desperate bid for survival. Others, their pride and rage overriding their sense of self-preservation, redoubled their efforts to crush the human resistance, throwing themselves into the fight with reckless abandon. But it was too late. The tide had turned, and the human fleet pressed its advantage with a relentless determination. The Thunderchild, the Valkyrie, the Endeavor, and countless other human ships fought with a unity and purpose that transcended individual crews and vessels. They were a single, unstoppable force, bound together by a common cause and an unbreakable will. As the battle reached its climax, the Clixathian fleet was in full retreat, their once proud ships reduced to battered hulks, fleeing before the onslaught of human might. The invaders had come to conquer, to subjugate a primitive species, and claim their worlds for the glory of the Clixathian Empire. Instead, they had found a people who would not be cowed, who would fight to the last to defend their homes and their way of life. In the aftermath of the battle, as the human fleet consolidated its victory and began the process of rebuilding and healing, a new reality began to dawn on the galaxy. The human race, once dismissed as a minor player on the galactic stage, had proven itself to be a force to be reckoned with. They had stood against the might of the Clixathian Empire and emerged victorious, their courage and determination a shining beacon to all who valued freedom and justice. And as news of the human triumph spread across the stars, a new era began to take shape. An era in which the human race would take its rightful place among the great powers of the galaxy, an era in which the name of humanity would be spoken with respect and admiration by all who witnessed their indomitable spirit and unyielding resolve. The Klexethians had come to conquer, but in the end, it was they who had been conquered. They had challenged the wrong species, the wrong fleet, and in doing so, they had sealed their own fate. The human race had proven, beyond any doubt, that they were a people who would never surrender, never submit, and never back down in the face of adversity. And as the galaxy watched in awe and wonder, the legend of the human fleet began to grow, a legend that would endure for generations to come. A legend of courage, of determination, and of the unbreakable spirit of a species that had dared to stand against the darkness and emerge victorious. The price of arrogance. In the face of the human fleet's unrelenting advance and the mounting losses suffered by his own forces, Commander Zorgax found himself gripped by a sense of desperation and disbelief. The once proud Klexethian armada, the scourge of 100 conquered worlds, was being systematically dismantled by a species they had dismissed as primitive and insignificant. Driven by a toxic mix of wounded pride and seething rage, Zorgax made a fateful decision. He would unleash the full might of the Klexethian Empire's most advanced weaponry, technologies so devastating that their use had been strictly forbidden, except in the direst of circumstances. Activate the quantum nullifier, Zorgax commanded, his voice trembling with a combination of anger and desperation. Target the heart of the human fleet and fire when ready. The bridge crew hesitated, their eyes widening in shock at the implications of their commander's order. The quantum nullifier was a weapon of last resort, capable of erasing matter at a subatomic level and leaving nothing but an eerie, lifeless void in its wake. "But, Commander," one brave officer ventured, his voice quavering with fear, "the use of the nullifier is strictly forbidden by the Galactic Accords. It could have catastrophic consequences for the entire sector." Zorgax rounded on the officer, his eyes blazing with a manic fury. "I will not be lectured on galactic law by a mere underling," he snarled. "The humans have brought this upon themselves with their insolence and defiance. Now they shall bear witness to the true power of the Klexethian Empire." With a sense of grim finality, the crew carried out their commander's orders. The quantum nullifier, a sinister device that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly energy, began to power up, its activation sequence casting a sickly green glow throughout the ship. As the human fleet continued its relentless assault on the Klexethian vessels, the sensors aboard the HMS Thunderchild suddenly detected an alarming surge of exotic energy emanating from the alien flagship. "Captain Dunbar," the science officer called out, her voice edged with urgency. "I'm picking up a massive energy buildup on the Klexethian command ship. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." Dunbar leaned forward in his chair, his brow furrowed in concern. "Can you identify the source of the energy signature?" he asked, his mind racing with the possibilities. The science officer shook her head, her fingers flying across her console as she worked to analyze the data. "Negative, sir. It doesn't match anything in our databases. But whatever it is, it's incredibly powerful and potentially devastating." Dunbar's eyes narrowed, a sense of foreboding washing over him. He knew that the Klexethians, driven by desperation and wounded pride, were capable of resorting to any means necessary to secure victory. And if they were preparing to unleash some kind of doomsday weapon, the consequences could be catastrophic. "Helm, bring us about," Dunbar barked, his voice cutting through the chaos of the bridge. "Divert all available power to shields and prepare for evasive maneuvers. We need to be ready for anything." As the Thunderchild and the rest of the human fleet braced for the impending onslaught, the Klexethian flagship shuddered with the immense power of the quantum nullifier. The weapon, its very existence a violation of the most sacred laws of galactic warfare, thrummed with an unearthly resonance as it prepared to unleash its devastating payload. On the bridge of the flagship, Commander Zorgax watched with a mixture of anticipation and dread as the nullifier reached full power. He knew that the use of such a weapon would forever mark him as a war criminal, a pariah among the civilized races of the galaxy. But in that moment, blinded by his own arrogance and desperation, He saw no other choice. "Fire the quantum nullifier," Zorgax commanded, his voice a ragged shout that echoed through the ship. With a blinding flash of sickly green light, the nullifier unleashed its payload, a seething vortex of exotic energy that ripped through the fabric of space itself. The human fleet, caught in the path of the weapon's destructive field, found their shields and hulls alike dissolving under the onslaught, their very atoms torn apart by the horrifying power of the device. Aboard the Thunderchild, Captain Dunbar watched in horror as ships around him simply vanished, their crews and structures erased from existence in the blink of an eye. The quantum nullifier, he realized with a sinking feeling of dread, was a weapon capable of annihilating entire worlds, a tool of unimaginable destruction that defied the very laws of physics. But even in the face of this terrifying onslaught, the human fleet refused to yield. With a grim determination born of desperation and an unyielding will to survive, the remaining ships rallied around the Thunderchild, their weapons and shields working in concert to hold back the tide of annihilation. "Divert all power to forward shields," Dunbar commanded, his voice a beacon of strength amidst the chaos. "Concentrate fire on the Klixathian flagship. We need to take out that weapon before it can fire again." The human fleet, battered but unbroken, surged forward with a renewed sense of purpose. Their weapons, powered by the fury and determination of a species fighting for its very survival, tore into the Klixathian flagship with a savage intensity. Explosions blossomed across the alien vessel's hull as the human onslaught found its mark, the quantum nullifier's eldritch energies flickering and dimming under the relentless barrage. On the bridge, Commander Zorgax watched in disbelief as his ultimate weapon, the very symbol of Klixathian might, began to falter and fail. "Impossible," he snarled, his voice a mix of rage and disbelief. "The humans cannot be allowed to triumph. We are the masters of the galaxy." But even as he spoke, the Thunderchild and its allies pressed their attack, their weapons finding the weaknesses in the Klixathian flagship's defenses and exploiting them with ruthless efficiency. The quantum nullifier, its power systems overloading under the strain of the human assault, began to spiral out of control, its destructive energies turning inward and consuming the very ship that housed it. In the end, it was the Klixathians' own arrogance and desperation that proved their undoing. The use of the quantum nullifier, a weapon so terrible that its mere existence violated the most fundamental laws of galactic warfare, had sealed their fate. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, had weathered the storm and emerged victorious, their courage and determination a testament to the unbreakable spirit of their species. As the Klixathian flagship exploded in a blinding flash of light, the remaining alien vessels broke and fled, their once proud crews reduced to little more than frightened remnants scrambling for survival. The human fleet, triumphant but weary, watched as their foes disappeared into the void, the price of their arrogance and aggression paid in full. In the aftermath of the battle, as the human ships began the long process of rebuilding and healing, a sense of grim satisfaction and hard-won pride settled over the fleet. They had faced the worst the Klixathian Empire had to offer, and they had emerged victorious, their courage and determination a shining beacon to all who would dare to challenge the indomitable will of the human spirit. And as the galaxy watched in awe and wonder, the legend of the human fleet began to grow, a tale of bravery and sacrifice that would be told and retold for generations to come. The Klixathians had come to conquer, but in the end, it was they who had been conquered, their arrogance and cruelty laid low by the unbreakable spirit of a species that would never back down, never surrender, and never give up in the face of adversity. An empire humbled. In the wake of the Klixathian flagship's destruction and the devastating defeat of their once invincible armada, the surviving alien ships fled the battlefield in disarray, their crews gripped by a sense of shock and disbelief. The mighty Klixathian Empire, the scourge of 1,000 worlds, and the self-proclaimed masters of the galaxy, had been brought low by a species they had dismissed as primitive and insignificant. Aboard the shattered remnants of the alien fleet, a palpable sense of despair and confusion reigned. The Klixathian warriors, once filled with the unshakable confidence of a people who had never known defeat, now found themselves adrift in a galaxy that had suddenly become a far more dangerous and uncertain place. On the bridge of the Klixathian dreadnought Invictus, the highest-ranking surviving officer, Admiral Zolthor, surveyed the wreckage of his once proud fleet with a mixture of horror and disbelief. The admiral, a grizzled veteran of countless campaigns and a staunch believer in the supremacy of the Klixathian way of life, struggled to come to terms with the enormity of their defeat. How could this have happened? Zolthor muttered, his voice a hoarse whisper that echoed through the eerily quiet bridge. We are the Klixathian Empire, the greatest power in the galaxy. How could we have been bested by these primitives? The bridge crew, their faces etched with the same shock and disbelief that gripped their admiral, had no answer. They had witnessed the impossible, the unthinkable. A species that by all rights should have been little more than a footnote in the annals of Klixathian conquest had instead risen up and dealt a crushing blow to the very heart of their empire. As the Invictus and the other surviving Klixathian ships limped their way back towards the heart of their territory, the true scale of their defeat began to sink in. The loss of the flagship and so many of their most powerful warships was a blow not just to their military might, but to the very foundation of their society. For generations, the Klixathian Empire had been built on the unshakable belief in their own superiority, the conviction that they were destined to rule the galaxy, and that all other species were little more than chattel to be enslaved or eradicated at their whim. But now, in the face of their crushing defeat at the hands of the humans, that belief had been shattered, and the Klixathians found themselves facing an existential crisis unlike any they had ever known. As news of the defeat spread throughout the empire, shock and disbelief gave way to anger and recrimination. The Klixathian people, so long accustomed to the idea of their own invincibility, struggled to come to terms with the idea that they could have been bested by a species they had long regarded as inferior. In the halls of power on the Klixathian homeworld, the ruling council convened in an atmosphere of barely contained panic and desperation. The councilors, once so confident in their ability to bend the galaxy to their will, now found themselves grappling with the reality of a universe that had suddenly become a far more dangerous and unpredictable place. The humans must be made to pay for this outrage, one councilor snarled, his voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. We cannot allow this affront to our power to go unanswered. But others, perhaps more pragmatic, or simply more in touch with the grim reality of their situation, counseled caution. We have already underestimated the humans once, another counselor warned, her voice heavy with the weight of bitter experience. To do so again could spell the end of our empire. As the debate raged on, Admiral Zolthor and the surviving members of the Klixathian fleet struggled to come to terms with their new reality. The once proud warriors, their confidence shattered and their sense of purpose lost, found themselves adrift in a galaxy that had suddenly become a far more uncertain and treacherous place. Some, their pride and arrogance still intact despite the crushing defeat they had suffered, clung to the belief that the Klixathian Empire would rise again, that they would have their revenge against the upstart humans, and restore their rightful place as the masters of the galaxy. But others, perhaps more clear-eyed or simply more in touch with the grim reality of their situation, began to question the very foundations of their society. They had been raised to believe in the superiority of the Klixathian way of life, the idea that they were destined to rule over all other species. But now, in the face of their defeat at the hands of the humans, that belief had been shattered, and the Klixathians found themselves grappling with the realization that their way of life, their very identity as a people, might have been built on a lie. As the Klixathian Empire struggled to come to terms with its new reality, the rest of the galaxy watched with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and perhaps even a hint of grim satisfaction. For too long, the Klixathians had been the scourge of the galaxy, a brutal and oppressive regime that had enslaved and eradicated countless species in their relentless quest for power and domination. But now, in the wake of their defeat at the hands of the humans, the Klexethian Empire found itself humbled, its once unassailable power shattered, and its sense of purpose lost. The galaxy, so long in thrall to the Klexethian threat, began to stir with the first tentative hopes of freedom and self-determination. And as the human fleet, battered but unbroken, continued to stand watch over the stars they had fought so hard to defend, the rest of the galaxy began to look to them as a beacon of hope and inspiration. The humans, once dismissed as primitives and savages, had shown themselves to be a force to be reckoned with, a people with the courage, determination, and sheer stubborn will to stand up to even the most powerful and oppressive of foes. In the end, the Klexethians had been undone by their own arrogance and hubris, their unshakable belief in their own superiority blinding them to the true strength and resilience of the human spirit. They had come to conquer, to enslave and eradicate, but in the end, it was they who had been conquered, their empire humbled and their way of life shattered by a species they had once regarded as little more than insects to be crushed underfoot. And as the galaxy watched in awe and wonder, the legend of the human victory began to grow, a shining beacon of hope and inspiration to all those who had lived too long under the shadow of Klexethian oppression. The humans had shown that even the most powerful and seemingly invincible of empires could be brought low by courage, determination, and the unbreakable will of a people fighting for their freedom and their very survival. It was a lesson that the Klexethians, in their arrogance and their hubris, had learned too late, and it was a lesson that the rest of the galaxy would remember for generations to come, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit and the unquenchable desire for liberty and justice that burned in the hearts of all those who called the stars their home. Echoes of Defiance. In the aftermath of their resounding victory over the Klexethian Armada, the human fleet found itself at the center of a galaxy that had been forever changed by their actions. The news of their triumph spread like wildfire, carried on the wings of subspace communications, and whispered in the halls of power on 1,000 worlds. To the oppressed and subjugated species of the galaxy, the humans became a symbol of hope and defiance, a shining example of what could be accomplished when the downtrodden and the marginalized dared to stand up and fight for their freedom. On worlds that had long languished under the yoke of Klexethian rule, the first stirrings of rebellion began to take root as the long-suppressed dreams of liberty and self-determination once again began to seem like more than just a distant fantasy. But even as the galaxy celebrated the humans' victory and the Klexethian Empire grappled with the shocking reality of its defeat, the men and women of the human fleet knew that their work was far from over. The Klexethians, for all their arrogance and brutality, were not the only threat to the peace and stability of the galaxy, and the humans knew that they could not afford to rest on their laurels. And so, even as the fleet licked its wounds and began the long process of rebuilding and resupplying, its leaders set to work on a new strategy, one that would ensure that the sacrifices of their fallen comrades had not been in vain. They knew that the galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, filled with both wonders and horrors beyond imagining, and that the only way to secure a lasting peace was to be ever vigilant and always prepared for the worst. To that end, the human fleet began to establish a network of outposts and listening stations throughout the star systems they had liberated from Klexethian rule, a web of eyes and ears that would allow them to keep a watchful eye on the galaxy and respond quickly to any new threats that might emerge. They forged alliances with the newly freed species of the galaxy, offering them the protection and support of the human fleet in exchange for their cooperation and assistance in maintaining the peace. At the same time, the humans began to reach out to the other great powers of the galaxy, the ancient and enigmatic civilizations that had long watched the Klexethian Empire's rise with a wary eye. The humans knew that they could not hope to maintain the peace on their own, and that they would need the support and cooperation of these other great powers if they were to have any hope of creating a truly stable and peaceful galactic order. It was a delicate balancing act, one that required all the diplomatic skill and finesse that the human leaders could muster. But slowly, painstakingly, they began to make progress, forging new alliances and building bridges of understanding and cooperation that had once seemed all but impossible. As the weeks and months passed, the galaxy began to settle into a new equilibrium, one in which the humans and their allies worked tirelessly to maintain the peace and keep the forces of chaos and oppression at bay. It was not an easy task, and there were many setbacks and challenges along the way. But through it all, the humans remained steadfast in their commitment to the ideals of freedom, justice, and self-determination that had brought them to this point. And as the years turned into decades, the legend of the human victory over the Clixathian Empire only grew, becoming a symbol of hope and inspiration to oppressed peoples throughout the galaxy. On worlds that had once known only the boot of Clixathian oppression, statues and monuments were raised to honor the courage and sacrifice of the human fleet, while the names of its greatest heroes became the stuff of legend and song. But even as the galaxy celebrated the humans and their allies as the saviors of the oppressed and the defenders of the weak, there were those who looked upon their rise with envy and resentment. The Clixathian Empire, though humbled and diminished, had not been completely destroyed, and there were many among its ruling class who burned with the desire for revenge against the upstart humans who had dared to challenge their supremacy. Other great powers, too, saw the humans rise as a threat to their own ambitions and designs, and began to plot and scheme in the shadows, seeking ways to undermine the fragile peace that the humans had worked so hard to build. And on the fringes of the galaxy, new and unknown threats began to stir, drawn by the promise of power and plunder in a galaxy that had been thrown into chaos by the humans' victory. Through it all, the men and women of the human fleet remained vigilant, always ready to defend the ideals and the peoples they had sworn to protect. They knew that the road ahead would be long and hard, and that there would be many challenges and sacrifices still to come. But they also knew that they had the strength, the courage, and the determination to see their mission through to the end, no matter what the cost. And so, as the galaxy watched and waited, the human fleet stood tall and proud, a shining beacon of hope and defiance in a universe that had for too long been shrouded in darkness and despair. They were the guardians of the peace, the defenders of the weak, and the champions of freedom and justice for all the peoples of the galaxy. Their road would be long and hard, and there would be many challenges and setbacks still to come. But with the strength of their convictions and the courage of their hearts, the humans knew that they would prevail, no matter what the galaxy might throw at them. For they were the defenders of the light, the guardians of the future, and the hope of all the oppressed and downtrodden peoples of the stars. And in the end, that was all that mattered. For in a galaxy that had for too long been ruled by fear and oppression, the humans had shown that there was another way, a path of courage, compassion, and hope that could lead to a brighter tomorrow for all the peoples of the universe. And that, more than any victory or triumph, was the true legacy of the human fleet and the shining promise of the future that they had helped to build.